Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. As we're set to deliberate the latest developments here in Israel throughout the region and beyond, including heightened tensions, particularly on the northern front, it's always important to remember how the war began. 347 days ago, on October 7th of last year, the Islamist Hamas terror group, alongside its affiliates in the Gaza Strip, launched a surprise onslaught on southern Israel, declaring war by perpetrating a massacre, murdering some 1,200 mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping roughly 250 people, including elderly, men, women, children, and infants. 101 of them remain in Hamas captivity to date. Subsequently, the next day, on October 8th of last year, Iran practically joined the war when it greenlighted its proxy in Lebanon, Hezbollah, to launch cross-border attacks against Israel. Since then, this Iranian proxy has launched over 6,000 projectiles towards Israeli territory, and not Hezbollah alone. Additional Iranian proxies have launched from Syria, from Iraq, as well as from Yemen, including Iran proper, on the night between the 13th and 14th of April earlier this year, when it launched over 300 projectiles from Iranian territory directly towards Israel. Now, as I mentioned earlier, heightened tensions on the northern front. Mr. Amir Oren, TV7's editor-at-large, what you can tell us on the latest.
So let's start from the end and try to roll it back to the beginning. The end state, which Israel desires, and justifiably so, is that there will be quiet on the northern front. All the Israeli residents, almost 100,000, who had to leave their homes and are displaced for almost a year, will go back. Their villages and towns will be rehabilitated, and the Hezbollah infantry and commando force will be pushed back at least 10 kilometers from the Israeli border. How does one go about achieving that? Either through diplomacy, or, if that does not work, through force. Up to now, Israel has not done anything regarding forcing Hezbollah away from the border for various reasons, mostly because it is still fighting in Gaza. Hezbollah announced that once there is a ceasefire deal in Gaza, which will, of course, include the return of the Israeli hostages, then Hezbollah too will lay down its arms. This will not, of course, satisfy the Israeli demand for pushing back Hezbollah. This is not in the cards right now, so Israel has to make a choice whether it is now going on a ground campaign or whether it is waiting for a better opportunity.
Indeed. Two schools of thought that are currently in the height of deliberations. For that, I'd like actually to start with our colleague in Spain, Madrid, namely Dr. Rafael Barraji, formerly a national security advisor of Spain and currently the CEO of Worldwide Strategy. It's good to see you, Rafael.
My pleasure.
Two schools of thought. The pleasure is all ours, of course. Two schools of thought. The first one, to launch a significant attack against the Iranian proxy Hezbollah, particularly focused on the southern part of Lebanon, and to ensure the implementation of 1701. Within that context, of course, there are all kinds of variables that I won't go into, but nonetheless, the second school of thought is seek a conclusion to the war in Gaza and attempt to find a temporary cessation of hostilities, even if it costs at a longer ceasefire, which would be forced upon Israel due to various pressures from the international community, and then will bring about a period of relative quiet that will allow Israel to build itself for a moment where it will feel comfortable enough to launch not only a war against Hezbollah, but a multi-sector war against the head of the octopus, namely the Islamic Republic of Iran and its proxies in Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and Lebanon.
Well, first of all, Jonathan, let me remind everyone that war is a very fluid situation. When everything started firing rockets from Hezbollah to the north of Israel, people thought that, well, Nasrallah has decided to do the minimum he can to save face in order to join the Hamas attack against Israel. But over time, I think Nasrallah has been changing his view and his strategy, and now is engaged in Israel in a war of attrition, basically. I said here before that, in my own opinion, Nasrallah may be thinking that he's getting much more benefits from the current situation than the Israelis are. No? On the other hand, the Israeli government has been trying to achieve new rules of engagement in the south of Lebanon, trying to push up north the strategic forces of Hezbollah, trying to push backwards the long-range systems that were deployed in the south of the Litani, and responding to any escalation from the terrorist group of Lebanon, Hezbollah. But after almost a year of tit for tat, I think the strategy has to be rethought. And I think we saw a few days ago that when intelligence was provided to the leadership of Israel, they took the decision to preempt any attack, major attack against central Israel. And I think it's the time to rethink really whether the current strategy is working or has to be shifted somehow. Maybe open the new front now that the hostilities in Gaza seems to be going down. No? But again, I don't have all the cards in my hand, so it's a tough decision. But definitely, I agree with Amir. The situation is not possible to continue with 100,000 of people displaced or under the fear of an attack, including Tel Aviv itself. So something has to be done.
Indeed. Also joining our discussion, as usual, is the commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense, namely Brigadier General in Reserve Doron Gavish. It's good to see you, General. I'd like to ask you particularly, the pleasure's all ours. I'd like to ask you particularly on the fact that we have the three top commanders that have to do with the Northern Front, namely the commander of Northern Command of the IDF, Ori Goldin, alongside the IDF Chief of General Staff, Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, as well as Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, spearheading the necessity to launch a significant campaign to force the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701 that would not only provide security for the residents of northern Israel, but will also indulge them by granting them a sense of security that would then also drive them to reoccupy their own houses that have been left abandoned for almost a year now.
Well, indeed, Jonathan, of course, we are democracy, and the decision to go to a full-scale war will be made by the Israeli cabinet and the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. But from a pure military point of view, the main mission of the Northern Command is to keep the security of the citizens on the northern part of Israel. And of course, it is hard to say that this is the situation that we are at. We talked about the 100,000 of citizens that are not there, but the ones that are there are continuously, daily being shot by the Hezbollah. We're talking about 50 to 100 almost every day rockets and other projectiles, which is, of course, unbearable. So from a military point of view, there is no question that this should be solved. The IDF is fully prepared to it. The Israeli Air Force, the Northern Command, and the other forces that are part of it are ready for the decision of the Israeli government. There are all kinds of plans that were shown to the government and, of course, to the cabinet, and the decision would be made there. Of course, as much as you can, you take all the other considerations. And as Rafael was rightly saying, that we know that war is really, you know how you start, you don't know how you end it. You could build strategies, but it is very fluent and complicated. But you have to plan as much as you can also to the consequences of what you are doing. So this is basically what the IDF is prepared for in the northern part of Israel. We're talking about the Air Force, the Navy, the ground forces, and all the capabilities are there.
Indeed. Mr. Oren, at the start of this war, we had Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and IDF Chief of General Staff Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi coming out and saying we need to open a two-front war. This will be painful. Nevertheless, it is necessary. The position of the two war cabinet ministers at the time, Gadi Eisenkot and Benny Gantz, prevailed within the war cabinet, and ultimately Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu decided not to launch a two-front war, pursuing the wisdom of ancient Roman laws that have always shied away from opening multiple fronts. Nevertheless, ancient Roman laws also dictate that once you know the battlefield and you realize that you have a better starting point, that is the timing for you to act, because this timing may not come back in the same format. And you, as Dr. Barachi also mentioned, war is fluid, and therefore it's better not to delay for a later time in the future. How can we now, within the scope of international challenges, pressures, realities that are also fluid in Ukraine, the situation in the Pacific, various developments, if we're talking about Ethiopia, Egypt, Somalia, and much more, on the brink of potentially yet other wars around the globe, how can Israel maneuver in a manner that will grant it the legitimacy, not only under international law, which it already has, but rather the legitimacy of allies around the world to back it in its hour of need?
It is true that Netanyahu lives in Caesarea, but let me assure you, having heard the real account of what happened in those cabinet sessions, he didn't think of any Roman maxim this way or the other way. He was hardly able to make decisions, and he was helped by others. And what Gallant and Halevi proposed at the time, was not a two-front war, but only a northern war, because at that time Israel was not even starting its ground maneuver into Gaza. And also, this is a different campaign than the one being talked about now.
One moment, you're proposing the fact that they were suggesting only a northern war and not even to enter into Gaza at a time when roughly 250 civilians were taken?
In sequence. They didn't, first of all, Israel didn't have enough ground forces to undertake two campaigns simultaneously. Then, after the northern campaign was canceled because it was about to be launched, and there were various actions taken and then aborted, then some 2.5 weeks later, the ground campaign started in Gaza. But this is ancient history by our standards now. Let me put in a word for secret diplomacy. American-Iranian diplomacy. Maybe it's naive. The Iranians don't want Hezbollah to be destroyed. We all agree that this is their outpost for the time they will have their nuclear weapons, and they will not want an Israeli attack on their facilities. And therefore, they need Hezbollah to deter Israel. So Iran has an incentive in avoiding this war. If that's the case, Iran should put pressure on Hamas. Up to now, we have only heard about Qatar and Egypt trying to press Hamas to agree to the deal, now on the table, or a better form. And if that happens, and then Hezbollah ceases fire, we can avoid a war in the north. That's at least one option, the road not taken.
Indeed. But with that being said, yesterday, Colonel Joel Rayburn was on our weekly deep dive edition, during the course of which he did highlight that the Houthis, namely Ansar Allah in Yemen, launched a ballistic missile towards central Israel. The designation, according to General Amnon Sofrin, was the international airport Ben Gurion, and if that would have struck a sensitive or even a civilian terminal, the consequences thereof would have been full-fledged war. So the Iranians are taking those risks. They are granting their proxies enough leeway in order to engage in adventurism that may cost it a lot more, and therefore it's not necessarily that Hezbollah is as constrained as people try to depict it, albeit not necessarily in the logical strategic discourse that the Iranians have pursued to date. Dr. Bardahi, your take?
Well, following what Amir just said, I think it's unfair and unrealistic to put all the irrationality in the decision-making of our countries and all the rationality in the decision-making of our enemies. I think stupidity is commonly shared everywhere, no matter what social group you mean or what nationality. And I think believing that the Iranians or Nasrallah or anyone else may not be forced by some kind of dark, irrational sentiments and feelings and mistakes is not the best way to produce any strategy for the future. So I think putting all the hope in a secret diplomacy between the Americans and Iranians is fine, but I think you should prepare for exploiting any vulnerability that your enemies may have. And I think it was the time in the past, several years ago, 2012, for instance, it has been an excellent opportunity last April when Iranian launched direct attack against Israel. And it's about time to think seriously whether you will be better off if engaging your enemies right now than waiting to some kind of diplomatic efforts fulfill our dreams, no? Which in the past never happened.
Iran is more concerned about losing Bandar Abbas than losing Hezbollah, if we're looking at the big picture, since 90% of its energy would be cut off and it would pretty much crumble into one of the weakest countries in Asia, if not the weakest. But with that, well, maybe it will par together with the Yemenites. But General Gavish, when we're talking about particularly Yemen, they launched a ballistic missile, and I was hoping to ask you personally on this. What can you tell us about that? Naturally, the Iranians have claimed that it's not their missile and all kind of fairy tales, but nonetheless, we're talking here about a missile that was launched directly towards central Israel. They claimed it to be a hypersonic missile. I didn't really see those characteristics to what was proclaimed. Nevertheless, you are the expert.
Well, Jonathan, before going into it, I must add to what was said by Dr. Bardahi. You know, we are in a war. It's not that we are in a situation before or something like this. We are in a war. The Hezbollah shot toward Israel 7,000 rockets during the last 10 months. So we have to take it into consideration. We're not talking about the Hamas anymore. We're talking about Iran that shot toward Israel 300 projectiles last April. We're talking about the Yemenis, I mean the Houthis, as you just mentioned. So we are in a war with Iran, and there is no question mark about that. For the missile that was shot toward Israel, you are right. It was kind of a ballistic missile, a long one, made by, of course, the Iranians with some adaptations that they did to it, but it was nothing close to what they proclaimed it to be. It is not hypersonic. Hypersonic is a completely different story. We didn't shoot against it 20 missiles as they should. I mean, there was nothing really that was accurate in what was said by them. So if we're looking at it from our point of view, we have to say that till now, there were 9 missiles that were launched toward Israel. 8 of them were fully intercepted. This one was intercepted, but not fully. And some of the parts fell down. It didn't go to its target, but still some of it went down to the ground in Israel. The way that we are looking at it, by the way, it is not a mission kill, it is a full kill of the warhead. Because if we would look at it only as a mission kill, we could say that we did what we needed because it didn't do its mission. But this is not the way we are looking. We are looking only success from our point of view. It means that the warhead was completely destroyed. From the air defense point, there was arrow missiles that were shot toward it. We know that it was basically dismantled in the air to few parts, and some of them fell in the ground. Again, nowhere they're planned, but it did went down to the ground. We say again and again that we cannot defend in 100%, and it is not hermetic. And we say again and again to the civilians here in Israel, when the sirens are going off, you have to go to the shelters and to listen carefully to the orders that are being issued by the Home Front Command. This is something specific, but this is exactly what we should continuously say to ourselves, because at the end of the day, this is what saves life. And until today, it saves a lot of lives. And same as with the last missile, basically, no one was harmed from it.
Thank you, General Gavish. Mr. Oren, 101 Israelis, some of them dual nationals, the majority of them civilians, are still in Hamas captivity, including the Bibas boys, who are just barely 3 and 4, toddlers for that matter. What is currently being done in order to reach the conclusion of an agreement? Of course, Hamas continues to stand fast on its demand for an entire Israeli withdrawal and a lot of inflated numbers with regard to terrorists with blood on their hands to be released from Israeli jails. But what can you tell us about that? And briefly, please, if you may.
Yes, you mentioned the perhaps 2 or 3 most important demands that Hamas has, but the overall demand is for a full and final cessation of the war.
Stage 1, stage 2?
No, it doesn't matter. And you can also try to have a compact deal. You don't have to stretch it over 42 days and then another 42, because the hostages will not survive. It's in Israel's interest to do it in one piece. But because the government does not want to do it this way, and because it tries to put off the very problem that you mentioned, the list of murderers, those who were charged with capital crimes and are serving 25, 30-year terms, life terms, then it's stuck.
Indeed. Well, we have roughly 3 minutes, and therefore I'd like to ask you to keep it short. Dr. Bardahi, when we're talking about the necessity to destroy Hamas as a signal to the adversaries and enemies of Israel and the West at large, is this a viable mission at this point in time with so much international pressure being put on Israel's shoulders?
I do believe it is. The fact that Israel is still fighting after almost a year of international pressures has a big important strategic lessons. Israel has to face any challenge independently of the environment in the international community. And he has done so well in the last 12 months that I believe it can continue doing it until the complete destruction, politically and militarily, of Hamas. And that's the best deterrence Israel can have against all the rest of their enemies.
In half a minute each, what should we focus on for the next 24 hours to 48 hours? Dr. Bardahi, we'll start with you.
Well, I think all the decisions that may be taken, considering the northern front and regarding Hezbollah and the Iranian master in the background.
General Gavish?
First, we still have to remember we have 101 hostages in the hands of the murderers of the Hamas. This is something that we continuously have to keep in mind and to do whatever we can to bring them back. The other thing, of course, is eyes to the north. We have to remember that yesterday, the safety of the civilians of Israel in the northern part of Israel became officially part of the goals of this war. And this says something about where Israel is going at. From a military point of view, I would say it again, the IDF is prepared, the Air Force, the Navy, the ground forces, whatever would be needed to do also in the northern part of Israel to bring back the security for our civilians in the northern part.
Mr. Ullman?
It's very hard to get a strategic surprise when everyone knows that you are debating it. It doesn't mean that you can't get operational surprise. Israel still has to solve its political debate regarding the issue of whether Defense Minister Gallant is going to be replaced.
Indeed. Well, this is for another discussion since we ran out of time, but I'd like to thank Dr. Bardahi, General Gavish, and Mr. Owen, of course, for all of our insights for today's episode. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem, wishing you a good day. Shalom.
My name is Doron Gavish, and my background, 30 years of serving in the Israeli Air Force. My last job, I was the commander of the Israeli Air and Missile Defense during the introduction of the Iron Dome to the defense of Israel. All of this allows me really to be part of the team here in TV7. It is super important to have such a platform. We talk about the global situation, we talk about Israel and those different angles which are relevant to the discussion.
For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.